expertise into this matter and joining us today. We have about 70 participants on the line. I think we got 25 or 30 questions over to you from our participants today. So without any further ado, thanks again, and jump right in, unless Heather, you wanted to say something first.
The only thing I just wanted to say is that, you know, for anybody that wasn't on or might not be kind of following the real estate news, is that we've been pressing still hard for StreetEasy just to drop the $6 a day rental fee. There's just an article that came out this morning from Real Estate Weekly that mentions that, and actually finally like covers all of our points in dropping days on the market and the fees and just standing together as a community. So we'll circulate that. And then as far as last week's talk that we had, that is on our Facebook chat group. So if you're not a member of the Facebook chat group, please ask for an invite. Anna will send that link around again. And also feel free to share it on your on any of your social media. So I'll send that out just to make sure everybody has it. I don't know if I did get that circulated, but we'll also post this one, and we want to be generous in spirit with the information here and share it with the real estate community at large.
Great.
So that's
Thanks, guys. Again, first and foremost, hope everybody's hanging in there during this time. One thing I want to talk about real quick before diving into the questions. A lot of people are asking me if we're doing virtual continuing education classes. Because I guess everybody has time on their hands now. I'm trying to coordinate with the state to see the easy to do, like we're doing now. Just got an email that.
I'm in. So I dialed in and it's still not a great connection. Yeah.
You guys hear me?
How are you in it?
Can't hear you,
I dialed
Pierre.
in with the telephone number.
You hear me?
There we can.
All right, great.
I was just.
All right, guys. So to dive into the questions, you know, the biggest theme that I'm getting asked is the virtual.
Pierre, I'm sorry to stop you again. Everybody else, if you're not on mute, please make sure you mute so that we can hear Pierre and get good quality feed. Thank you.
All right, cool. That sounds a lot better. So the most common question I'm getting now is how are we going about setting up virtual closings, and what are the mechanics behind them? The virtual closing, it's a work in progress. We're trying to pull off one for tomorrow. So the way we're doing it, we're going to take co-op condos with financing condos that are cash deals. The co-op one's going to be the most difficult because a lot of property managers have closed their offices. I think I got a couple emails that they're closed till May 1st. So unless the board's willing to issue stock and leases and property managers will allow some kind of in-person interaction, that's going to be really difficult to pull off. What we can do is close an escrow if the property managers work with us, have the stock and lease signed, but the biggest wrinkle in any of this is dealing with the banks. The banks right now are struggling to figure out how to conduct a virtual closing because technically speaking, the whole purpose of having a bank attorney at the closing is that you have all the original loan documents signed, the liens filed, and then you authorize the release of the funds. So without having the physical, without having the funds, the original loan documents, a bank's not going to be able to fund the loan. So what we're seeing now is that we're trying to figure out, can we have all the documents pre-signed and everything via FedEx, which is having its own challenges these days. And once the bank gets the funds, the original loan documents, and we would do everything via wire. And so we do everything via wire in that circumstance. But it's a work in progress because now we're talking a couple day delay between signing documents and transferring ownership and funding a loan. You have to extend the per diem payoff of the seller's loan because things aren't going to be done in the normal course of time. So we're talking to our banks every single day, trying to figure out what they will and will not accept, and that's still an evolving issue. Now, the other thing is notaries. A lot of people are asking about notaries. The state is allowing notaries via FaceTime, like we're doing now. That's a non-issue, luckily. One of the questions that I think is outstanding is that if the person signing the power of attorney is not physically in New York State, can we still utilize the FaceTime aspect to do a notary? The other way to close a transaction under circumstances is real property is the easier one. So Nick's company, TitleVest, is acting as escrow agent for us on closings. So if you're let's take a cash deal, and I hate to take the easiest circumstance, but this is the one that's going to be 100% feasible. If we have a cash purchase and we have the seller pre-sign all of the documents and we send everything to TitleVest, TitleVest holds the deed, holds all the documents for recording. We wire them the funds. The moment they receive the funds, show that a wire has been transmitted to the seller authorizes the release of the deed. So that's rather mechanical and simple. Nick, I don't know if you want to chime in on the mechanics of that, but that's going to be easy to conduct. And real quick, just before Nick, I'll give you a second to say a couple words on this, but the other issue is going to be walkthroughs. If cash buyers aren't in a rush, how are you guys conducting walkthroughs? Buildings are not allowing, most buildings in the city right now are not allowing any guest service providers, contractors, anything to enter into the building. So I just had a closing adjourned where we were a cash co-op closing, supposed to close on Friday. Unfortunately, we were able to pull off the closing with the property manager. The building wouldn't allow a walkthrough. So the client said, I'm not buying this place for X amount of dollars without doing a walkthrough. There's no way. So we adjourned, and we're adjourned indefinitely now, is the issue. But Nick, before I go on, you want to chime in about the virtual closings and how you guys are doing it as escrow agent?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you guys, I think we had discussed on Friday, which was brand new news, the governor signed an executive order allowing for remote notary, which is something that we've never had here in New York, although it was something that was recognized, I would say, in a handful of states in the U.S. Since then, what we've done is draft language that makes, obviously I'll take a step back. There was a little bit of hysteria around remote notaries and what that meant precisely. Does it mean that you could have a remote notary with somebody using FaceTime or WhatsApp or eChat or whatever it is, or did you have to use one of what we know to be a handful of approved mechanisms to do remote notary, also known as RON, remote online notary mechanisms? So what we've done is draft language for title companies, for lawyers, and for banks to have an understanding and in symphony what mechanisms are approved by all, so we can work through the process together. So there are some banks and some title underwriters that are totally okay with a FaceTime WhatsApp mechanism, and there are a couple of banks and a couple of title underwriters that say no, we'd like you to use the approved online notary mechanisms that are one of, I would say, 4 or 5 companies that do it extremely well in the industry. With these online notary mechanisms, you actually don't even get a wet stamp. They're that advanced. At TitleVest, because of kind of who we are and how many mechanisms that we deal with from multiple underwriters and multiple banks, we can use any and all of them. So where it helps Pierre get your deals across the finish line, we can use either remote online notary mechanisms or remote notary via WhatsApp, so on and so forth, if Pierre's office is comfortable.
Yeah, no, we've been trying to figure this out. I mean, here's the thing, I break it down in three segments. Deals with financing have to wait for the banks to come around and figure this out, working with them daily. Deals with co-ops, all depends on the managing agent. And real property, condos, townhouses, cash deals, rather simple to do. But with a caveat, I say simple to do for the purposes of effectuating a closing. What's not simple, we talked about the walkthrough, and the other issue is move in and move out. Buildings aren't allowing people to move in and move out right now. How can a seller deliver vacant possession if it's a primary residence for them? If there's a tenant in place. That's going to be your biggest problem. We don't know when people will be able to start moving in and moving out. So that's, we can figure out the virtual closing on a lot of different fronts, and it'll get better with time. The bigger issue is when are buildings going to start allowing people in?
Don't you think we're going to see a lot more? Maybe we'll have closings with post-closing holdovers. In other words, they can close, but because the parties can't move in and out, you'll do a post-closing holdover.
Yeah, we can do that where the seller does a post-closing possession agreement to maintain still occupy the property. But that's if the buyer wants to go down that road. We're sitting here. Some buyers have rate locks. Some buyers are in a rush to close. Others are saying, I want to wait till, this mess is over. I don't want to deal with the seller renting the unit. For how long? What are the terms? It's we just had a firm-wide conference call on this yesterday, talking about this topic and talking about clients who want to renegotiate on their deals. And we're really trying to just base it on what the buyer wants to do, and what's feasible under the circumstances. If a buyer is anxious to close, we can make it happen. June, that's a great proposal, right? If the buyer's willing to do that, we can facilitate it. It's just whether are they willing to do it these days. I haven't done one yet with those parameters, but I'm sure we will at some point in the next couple of weeks.
I think if the rate lock, if somebody is financing and their commitment's going to expire and they have to close, that's the only way to do it, because the seller can't deliver possession now.
That's right. Have you guys has anybody on this call had a virtual closing yet? No, nobody. Yeah. Our first true virtual closing should be tomorrow, like a real one. We've had a couple skeleton closings over the last week or two, but not something that's been 100% virtual. So I'll let you guys know how it goes. We're still working at the thing, and I'll email everybody an update. My paralegal's actually on our way here to start working on it now. But let me jump off the virtual closing topic real quick. I got a lot of questions about rentals, about tenants currently in place, leases that have been signed, tenants that can't move in, and what to do. So tenants that currently are in place. The negative of this is that a lot of people are going to use this as an opportunity to retrade on rent and retrade on purchase prices. In some circumstances justified, and others just taking advantage of an opportunity. Now with tenants that are currently in place, the state came out and issued a law that there's a 90-day basically halt on any eviction proceedings. Right now, if you don't have the fear of eviction, you don't really have the highest incentive to pay your rent at the moment. So you're going to start seeing a lot of tenants opt not to pay their rent or use this as an opportunity to have the rent reduced. There's not much you can do. It's really going to be a matter of trying to work with the tenants. In this circumstance, everybody's going to be paying a price for what's going on. Nobody's going to be exempt from this. Landlord can't expect to be made completely whole. It's going top down in terms of how everybody's impacted. So if you do have a tenant in place, the best thing you can do is work with them, because in the 90-day time period, if that tenant loses their job, if that tenant has a reduction in income, there's a number of layoffs coming up in Manhattan in the next couple of weeks, and a number of salary reductions. It's inevitable that tenants gonna have financial hardship. Before we jumped on this call, I got a letter. We represent a landlord of a property, and the commercial tenant wrote us a letter saying we want a 3-month rent deferment and basically reduction of rent. That was the first piece of mail I opened up this morning. That's going to become commonplace on every single rental property in the city, and courts will not look favorably upon landlords trying to evict tenants the moment the 90-day period expires. So the best thing you can do is work with those tenants. Secondly, leases that were signed and waivers were issued, but tenants can't obtain possession, you're going to have to delay lease start dates. It's going to be almost impossible to force a tenant to start paying rent on a property that they can't occupy. Again, because move-ins aren't being permitted. So those are the two most common questions I received on rentals. Does that cover everybody's questions on that? Anybody wanted to add anything to what I just said?
Pierre, it's Sean.
Some buildings.
Hey, Sean, what's going on?
So my question was a little bit different. I have a vacant loft, fully executed lease, and the tenant cannot move out of their building to occupy for April 1st. So are they held to the term of the lease?
Now, can the tenant, is your building allowing move-ins though?
It's a small privately owned loft building.
Okay. So the question is, the tenant's current lease, they can't move out in order to be able to move into yours, and yours is ready, willing, and able basically to be occupied and moved in.
Correct, and they've actually done quite a lot to make it ready.
Yeah. That's a great scenario to bring up. By the letter of the law in black and white, the landlord satisfied all of their obligations under the lease and can start requiring lease payments as of April 1. There's nothing in there that's impeding the landlord's ability to deliver possession of the property. So by the letter of the law, the answer is yes. Practically speaking, the letter of the law doesn't contemplate pandemics. So everybody is going to take the current situation into account when determining what's legal and what's not, and what's permissible and what's not. In my honest opinion, I think all landlords should delay the start until people are able to move in, move out throughout the city in normal course. I think again, black and white, yes, the landlord has those rights. I think if the landlord tries to go to court, I think a court would laugh at them in a month or two if they start pursuing rent collection, and we're still living in this environment. So, Sean, is that a pretty clear summary of the question or the answer?
It's kind of what I thought. I have a landlord that probably won't back down on his position, but yeah, it's not really black and white.
No, it's definitely not. And again, the landlord has that ability, technically speaking. I just think from a practical perspective, it'd be a little egregious and a little overreaching to try to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, so then another one. June had a really good question. Are banks extending loan commitment letters due to the delay, and can they still utilize these loan commitment letters? I haven't had any expire just yet in the last, because we were doing closings up until Friday. This week's been, we're only in day 3 of this 100% virtual setup. So I haven't had any yet. Private banks will extend them. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think that banks will eventually extend them so long as the economy and lending environment isn't compromised. So the moment, things really, really unfold in an even more negative way than we are now, I think banks' just general reluctance to lend will increase, and they won't be inclined to extend the commitments. But I think for the time being, I don't think we're there yet. I think for the time being, you will see banks extend commitment letters, extend rate locks, and things of that nature. Maybe they'll charge a fee. I don't know, but that's going to be one of the questions we're keeping our eyes and ears open in terms of how this transpires. Another one, concessions on.
Pierre, just one other question about my question, which is, given that people's net worth very quickly has decreased, depending upon how invested they were in the market, have you heard anything about banks requiring updated employment letters or net worth statements, that bank statements, that kind of thing, to reassure them that somebody's net worth hasn't changed dramatically?
Not yet. Yeah. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay. Hey, June, I can answer a little bit to that.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So banks, when they're underwriting a person's general financial health, yeah, and they're looking at their total asset picture, they don't give equity assets their full value in an underwriting scenario. They generally only take around 60% of the value of them in 4 cases like this specifically.
Okay.
So if you have $100 in stock, yeah, the bank generally only accepts 60% of the value of that 100 for underwriting purposes. for this situation precisely.
But now, let's say the value of their stock is $50. So if they're taking 60% of $50, I'm just saying whatever percent they take, that's going to apply to whatever somebody's new net worth is.
Yes.
So it's probably too early for us to tell whether this is going to be, how the banks are going to deal with feeling comfortable with extending their commitment to someone.
Yeah.
Because they don't know what the person's financial condition is today versus what it was a month ago or 2 months ago before this hit.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I guess to give you just a shade more confidence is that generally 100% of people's net worth is not sitting in stock, right? So there's cash on hand. So for the bank to have initially given a commitment, there's X amount of cash dollars available, so on and so forth. So the situation would have to become materially more dire for banks to alter underwriting standards to that end.
So, guys, I want to throw a question of my own in here that wasn't on this list and kind of transitioned a little bit of a positive note. It's funny. I was working from home. Today's my only day coming in. I have 2 little kids, so working from home is quite the challenge. So yesterday, I was actually inundated with calls about potential deals and new deals. We had 3 new clients come in yesterday. One, I'm representing all sellers, which makes my life a lot easier. But I want to talk about how we're still doing deals right now. One client was selling an $11 million investment condo where the buyer is buying it sight unseen, and the buyer's coming from overseas. So I don't think any of us have heard foreign money coming into the country at $11 million price tag sight unseen in quite some time. I thought that was a bit reassuring. Some people, especially investors, are probably going to look at this as an opportunistic time to buy into the market. We are getting a contract out on that deal today. I have another one, a sale of a townhouse for $4.5 million that came in yesterday. Developers buying it to, I believe, convert it to a 3-family, which was the original use. And then I have another sale of a condo downtown that a foreign national selling at a net loss, but still selling the property, and the buyers proceeding. And I believe that buyer's even obtaining financing. So I was delighted. 3 new transactions in one day in a week like this is, I was quite shocked. We also represent Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae in their national lending throughout the country. They're extremely active right now. We're actually still closing their loans. Their loans have always closed virtually, but we're seeing a high volume of new transactions in that area this week, which, a lot of that is driven by the reduction in rates. So there's still positive sentiment out there. I mean, my personal take is that once this nightmare is behind us, there's going to be such a amount of pent-up demand that I think we're all going to be extremely busy. It's going to take 3 to 6 months to get there. One of the questions I got in here is about rates. What's going on with rates? I mean, rates are at basically at zero right now. That's not changing anytime soon. We had the Fed cut their interest rate 3 times last year, and we all came into this year thinking we're going to maintain the same rate. No chance rates will decline further, and they have. To the point where banks, I'm reading, are actually increasing their interest rate because they can't handle the volume of refinance applications coming in the door. So, at some point, we're going to see the benefit of that help our marketplace and our activity. So there's still things going on. Are you guys working on any new deals that aren't in contract that people are actively negotiating right now, or is that come to a halt for most? June, I see you nodding your head. What tell me? I mean, they're still proceeding. People are able to build.
I mean, I'm seeing so much different. I am seeing behavior all over the place. But I will tell you that I have somebody who, one person who just returned to an open house like 2 weeks ago, who just called me to say, is it still available and how do I get pre-approved? So I think that if somebody is bold enough to buy into this market and actually execute, pull the trigger, they're going to be sitting very pretty. They're going to do very well as soon as this is behind us. For those of us who have been through many cycles like this, of dramatic things that have happened, it's going to be crazy. And I think it's a smart time to some extent for people to buy into. That said, I feel as though we work with a lot of buyers, and there are people who are saying now, well, if I wait another month or two, prices are going to soften further, so I'll do better.
Yeah.
Once again, it's somebody trying to time the bottom of the market. So.
Right. Right. Which, who knows, only if we had a crystal ball. The issue with representing buyers now is going to be due diligence. A week and a half ago, I actually had a managing agent email my office the board minutes, and they were willing to answer our questions via email. We were able to get a deal done with their office basically being closed. Because some companies have been closed for a couple of weeks already. The problem is, if property management companies that are completely shutting their doors or managing a building, how can we possibly get the due diligence materials? That's going to be the tough thing. If they're willing, so if you are negotiating a purchase deal, I would ask, was the property manager, some of them can log on remotely. Are they willing to email the board minutes and answer questions? If so, we can still do full due diligence. It won't be an issue, but it's all dependent on the property managers.
Here.
Yeah.
This is Diane speaking. In regard to the due diligence and the property managers, couldn't they utilize something like Board Packager and just put all the minutes out there for review only online? That would seem to quickly solve the problem.
They could. Quite honestly, I'm not very, very familiar with with how Board Packager works. I've never used it myself. But that would make sense to put it on a platform which would be accessible for every building, with a login and all that stuff.
And protected.
Yeah. Some boards, though, it all depends if the boards want the minutes, floating out there. The whole point of the fact that we have to go read the minutes is that we can't take them with us. So if there's negative information in there and our client ends up not becoming an owner in the building, they then have the minutes to disperse to the rest of the public. And that's why boards like to keep the minutes concealed at the property manager's office and by appointment only. But in this circumstance, if they want transactions closing in their building, they're going to have to adapt and do things like you suggested and what I suggested.
Right, and a lot of times there's a read-only capability, so they couldn't even print them out.
Right, there's definitely ways to do it, definitely. Oh yeah.
Hi, it's Heather. I was thinking, I wonder if there's a way we can aggregate information on who's been willing to allow reading of a minutes, because I'm expecting an offer on something, and I have to start to investigate what First Service is going to do. So maybe if people start, if anybody is doing a deal, maybe it might be helpful to be posting on maybe our Facebook chat group or something, saying so and so has been willing to cooperate and share minutes electronically, etc.
I can also reach out to, I'll reach out to Jim proactively. If he's not on this call already, I didn't double check. We can have a conversation with Jim about Board Packager and what information that they have and how they're coordinating with buildings to get information to brokers and lawyers. I'll reach out to him now.
Cool. One question I definitely want to jump on before we run out of time. Someone's asking you about concessions on sponsor deals. Going into this, the last year or so, we saw more concessions on new development than we'd seen since the financial crisis. The biggest concession that's going to come about as a result of the coronavirus are developers consenting to mortgage contingencies and funding contingencies. For those of you guys who were on the call on Friday, we talked about the funding contingency in depth. So I don't want to go into so much right now because I know a lot of the people on today's call were on Friday's call. But historically, developers wouldn't consent. You guys know this. Developers don't consent to any contingencies. In this market, anybody who's negotiating a deal with a client requiring financing, no matter what the deal is, they need a contingency. It's too uncertain of a time to take the risk unless they can close cash and have that ability. Then obviously, that's just a calculated risk for the buyer to decide on. But if the buyer needs financing, contingent, that's the newest concession I'm seeing, is that developers are consenting to that. So I think I know there's a lot of questions, but I think I got through almost all of them in one way or another by how the conversation evolved. Anybody have anything else?
Yes, Pierre, I did have a question about force majeure.
Yep.
Can you hear me? It's Sean.
Yeah, hey, Sean, you cut off a little bit.
So, okay, so in this pandemic situation, would the coronavirus put into action force majeure, even if it's not the current offering plan? Can someone use the pandemic as a reason to exercise force majeure? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, absolutely you are. So that's the only way to answer that is to actually litigate and see what case law would provide. You know, we were talking the other day about this, and someone, a client, there's a lot of clients are saying, you know, we want to get out of our contracts. That's inevitable that that request is going to come up, and we're having a lot of clients ask us about that and say, what rights do we have? The only circumstance similar to this, and where we're telling clients, if you would like, we can look up case law, would be around September 11th. How did courts rule when September 11th took place in terms of whether a crisis of that nature entitled people to get out of contracts? I think the answer is no, to be honest with you. We haven't started looking up case law as clients, you know, they know that it's kind of long shot. The contract does not contemplate an event like a pandemic whatsoever, and it doesn't take it in consideration. So force majeure, act of God, something that's greater than any of our abilities to consummate a deal. You know, the contract, I don't think that this will allow people to get out of deals from a legal perspective. That is my gut feeling, because
we tried to get out of a contract after 9/11 and in 2008, 2009, and both times it was impossible.
Yeah, Leonard, I would agree. I mean, in 08, 09, we were only successful on new development where we were able to find a caveat in the offering plan or something, a material change in the offering plan that the sponsor was not diligent on, and we used that as our way out of the deal. But no contracts got canceled based on solely the economy collapsing in 2008 and a terrorist attack in 2001. So I don't think that this pandemic is going to provide for any legal rights to cancel a contract.
Hey, Pierre.
Yeah.
Force majeure isn't even a consideration in the boilerplate residential contract either, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, so it's not included there. And also and then I'll take us back to 2012 with Hurricane Sandy, where there also would have been an opportunity to enforce a force majeure should we even have it. And I don't think people had the opportunity then, which was a legitimate act of God.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that a court of law is going to look at it and they're going to say, okay, well, this event did happen. However, you were able to consummate your transaction, you know, a month later.
Right.
Like, why did you get out, right? Hurricane Sandy closed the offices down for a week. You know, like, it's just the fact that it happened in the middle of your transaction won't give you the ability to get out.
Right.
The bigger picture is that if clients, you know, because you're going to have clients willing to walk away from deposits right now. The bigger picture is trying to just preserve the deal. Even if a buyer is arbitrarily saying, I want to get out of the deal, the best thing you can do, and we talked about this a lot on Friday, is give some kind of concession to keep them engaged enough to want to complete the deal. No one wants to go to court. It's a nightmare. Holding a deposit's not as easy as people think. And from experience, you know, by asking a client what would entice you enough to stay in this deal, most sellers will take, you know, I think I used the same saying on Friday, the bird in hand and take some kind of reduction in price just to keep the deal alive and to actually have a closing take place the next month or so.
Pierre, I have a quick question on that too. I have a situation where I had a closing that was scheduled for Tuesday, was adjourned, and we can't do a walkthrough. So we can't do a punch list walkthrough. And so, of course, my client's insisting that, and understandably, that they can't be forced to close without having done a punch list walkthrough. And so, you know, what happens when something like that occurs and we push it past? Because I will be honest, I don't totally agree with my client's attorney on this. What happens when that pushes it past the out date in the plan?
So the date where, so you're referring to the date where one unit has to close before the end of the Schedule A?
Yeah, I think we may have also negotiated a separate out date
Okay.
that we're approaching. So they want to close, they're ready to close, but they can't get us in to do a walkthrough because their construction office is like their management rep can't be there.
Right. I think all deadlines like you're describing, or a court would say that it's unreasonable not to extend those deadlines under the circumstance.
Okay.
So if you have a deadline of April 1st, where you have, we negotiate drop dead dates and sponsor contract, and we have an April 1st drop dead date, everything else is lined up to actually conduct the closing, except for the fact that a walkthrough cannot take place due to state of emergency. I don't think a buyer will have a leg to stand on to say, hey, I couldn't do my walkthrough, which I'm entitled to do in the contract, thus we can't close by April 1st. I'm canceling the deal, give me my money back. I would be hard pressed to imagine a court of law that would say, yeah, that's right, that deadline's set in stone. You know, the pandemic's irrelevant for a deadline in a contract.
Okay.
I think it's illogical. I think
yeah.
Off the bat, it's going to be all deadlines of that nature are going to be extended for, you know, a reasonable period of time based on what's going on.
Cool.
If you don't mind me asking, what was your attorney's opinion on that?
Hi, Pierre.
They think that we have a good argument that there is a statutory force majeure assumption, and if they can't deliver on their obligations, that we may be able to get out. I'm disinclined to agree with that.
Yeah, I agree with you, because technically speaking, they can deliver, they can probably transfer title under the circumstances. It's merely just the walkthrough.
Yeah, and it's a cash deal. If,
Yeah.
you know, there's no bank at the closing. Like,
honestly, too, a developer can offer to hold money in escrow under the circumstances, and you can still conduct the closing and conduct the walkthrough when legally permissible.
yeah.
You know, like court of law is going to say, hey, look, if the developer is going to put $500,000 in escrow pending a walkthrough post closing, why wouldn't you close?
Yeah.
You know, I totally agree with you.
And then actually, I'm sorry if I missed this before. Is anybody having issues with you can close but you can't move in, and because buildings aren't allowing moves, or in the event that moving companies can't operate anymore?
Yeah, we chatted about that earlier.
Right.
We are having that issue, and basically those closings are all getting adjourned.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody else?
I have a question about inspections.
Yep.
So I have clients who missed out on a property, but now we're going back to the table since the original winner backed out. We originally wanted an inspection, but obviously there's no way that's going to happen before contract, seeing as they're not essential employees. I just was wondering if anyone else has had this same situation or has any advice.
You want me to answer that one? I take it that one's more thrown to the group, right?
Yeah, sort of just to the group, or anyone that might have experience where you can't do an inspection, but you want to sort of have that assurance, or what do I even say to my clients about that?
I would say maybe an escrow. I've had the same situation. I have a buyer who may be backing out. And so I went to the backup client and said, you know, are you guys willing to waive an inspection? And the broker said, well, I'm very concerned that you're asking me to waive an inspection. And I'm like, well, you can't do an inspection. So, we've offered to provide the punch list from the previous inspection, but I think, you know, maybe doing a significant escrow or something. But if you can't do it, you can't do it. You have to figure out a way to work around it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool.
I wanted to have Jonathan Greenspun from Mercury, our lobbyist, kind of give us an update on everything that's going on government-wise and what's applicable to our industry, and then maybe some things personally for all of us.
Thanks, Heather. Hi, good morning, everyone. I hope you and your families are all healthy and safe. I have been monitoring the situation with government extremely closely, both city, state, and federal, because at this point, as you all know, government is in control. Just to run through, and I thought Pierre did a good job of covering a lot of what's been going on as far as tenants having to pay rent. As you know, there's now a 90-day moratorium on mortgages, but some of the largest landlord and real estate advocates have been out there calling for landlords to do the right thing and to stop all evictions. So, and I also want to echo the sentiments of what Pierre said, which is this is not the time to walk into landlord-tenant court and being the bad landlord who wanted to evict a tenant or demand payment. It's just the absolute worst look at the worst time, and something that could have long-term consequences for any property owner. We haven't talked about construction. I think that's an important thing to talk about. Construction continues in New York City. There have certainly been a call by some, both on the industry side, who are concerned about the health and safety of their workers, as well as the media and some politicians who just had an anti-construction development stand since day one, to pressure the mayor to shut down the buildings department and to shut down construction. At this point, de Blasio is not caving into those desires. He, at this point, is taking the stance that whoever can get paid during this time should continue to get paid. Although I think we all have to be concerned that if we start to see cases as a result of people being in close quarters, whether it's renovating a townhouse or an office building, I think that pressure is going to mount. There are going to be discussions with the governor, and potentially at some point, construction could cease. It has ceased in Boston and in San Francisco, and there are a lot of other people who are, again, calling on the mayor to have construction stop right now. But for now, it's full speed ahead. A few things that popped up yesterday that I'll just share with you. There's a move underway, or a call in Albany, that would allow some tenants to dip into their security deposits to pay next month's rent. We have to see where that goes. There have also been, I'm obviously, look, I'm really heartened to hear what the industry is experiencing right now. I have to tell you, I dialed in for this sole reason, just to see how your industry is holding up, and I'm really encouraged by what I heard Pierre and some others say, that virtual closings seem to be happening, deals are happening, and that's great news. But look, I am sure there are many on this call who are really worried about their independent business right now. And so, God willing, DC gets its act together today. Everything my DC office tells me is that stimulus bill is going to be passed today and probably signed within hours by Trump. And there will be a small business provision, which some in this group would be able to avail themselves of, whether it comes to loans and some other things. And so just rest assured that I'm keeping in close contact with the executive committee of NYRAC to let them know about everything that's going on. Yesterday, Department of Financial Services put out the codified rules about what banks and mortgage, those in the mortgage services, are now obligated to do. Heather, if you'd like, you can share that. It's unfortunately not in a very clean PDF. I'm trying to get a cleaner PDF because it's not searchable right now. If I get it, I'll send it to you, Heather, and you can distribute that. And as far as Albany is concerned, we need a budget by April 1. It's not mandatory. There could be an extension, but the legislators there have been assembly members and state senators who have tested positive. The members are very worried. They don't want to spend any more time up in Albany that's absolutely necessary, but the governor wants them there, and hopefully we'll get a budget. It's going to be a bare bones budget, I think. Some of the bad legislation that NYRAC has been concerned about, I think, doesn't really have a chance of passing. However, there is one piece of legislation, and I'm having a call with the lead sponsor in the Assembly today, is a bill that we wanted to see pass, which I think we need now more than ever, which is co-op and condos, many of you know, have been reluctant to accept, put in escrow a year's worth of maintenance because they think it violates the law passed last June that prohibits anyone from taking more than the first month's rent. There is a fix that's been floating around Albany since January. When we went up on our Albany mission, it didn't seem like there was a lot of desire to see that go through because nobody on the, nobody in the Senate who were the strong voices behind the rent laws wanted to see any tinkering with the rent laws. But I think you'll all agree that we have to completely revisit everything that's been done to real estate over the last year in light of the current climate. And so I should have an update about that later today. And I think that's it for now. If any of you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
I'm dealing with a situation right now where in a co-op where the board cannot take maintenance and escrow. We're dealing with two possible solutions just for whatever it's worth. One is if there's a guarantor involved with maintenance, instead of having the buyer put maintenance in escrow, if the escrow is connected to the guarantor, then you're getting around the law that you cannot take more than 1 month's rent from a tenant. The guarantor is not the tenant, by tenant. One option. The other is to try to have sellers put the money up and let the legal connection be between the buyer and the seller. So the seller is putting up escrow, which the board is fine with because it's not the tenant once again. And then there has to be a side agreement between the buyer who then, the seller would to the buyer, the seller is acting as a guarantor here to guaranteeing the payment and escrow and putting money in escrow. So that's what we're up to with one of our deals now, those two options.
Thanks, June. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Great to see everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Pierre. Thanks, Heather, for arranging this.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Agree. Thank you to both. Be safe, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.